then we're going to kick it off.
Sure.
David Leibowitz, I see. Yeah. Wow.
All righty.
Yeah.
Let's get rolling, ladies. Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are so glad you are here with us, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am so thrilled to present two of the most well-known, well-connected, and well-respected women we know from the world of PR and corporate communications. Before we get started, let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window below. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Most of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the interview. Also, please make sure your chat is set to address speakers and attendees. I want to thank our sponsors, for without their support, we couldn't keep this free. I want to thank First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, Four Roses Bourbon, the Fairlane Hotel, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, Moo TV, Jive Printing, Project Music, and Cushmaster's brand of CBD products. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome Laurie Jakobsen. Laurie is the president of Jaybird Communications, and she has over 25 years of PR and marketing communications experience, ranging from artist representation to startup.coms to major multinational music companies. She founded Jaybird in November of 2009 to focus on the needs of B2B companies in the music and tech industries. She started her career in the early 90s at boutique PR firm Surefire Media, working on traditional artist PR. And then in 1997, she joined the first internet-focused record label called N2K Encoded Music. And from there, worked with many startup and established companies in the early internet era. In 1999, she was recruited to handle all new technology-related communications at Sony Music Entertainment, including the launch of Press Play, which is now Napster. In 2003, she joined Harry Fox Agency to create the company's marketing and communications discipline so it could better respond to the digital marketplace. While at HFA, she earned her MBA from NYU Stern School of Business. She previously earned her undergraduate degree from Tufts University. Laurie is also active in fostering the next generation of entrepreneurs and creating more opportunities for underrepresented voices. Since 2013, she's been involved with the NYU Steinhardt Music Business Program's Entrepreneurship Program, and she's an early stage investor in several women and femme-founded startups through Pipeline Angels. Welcome, Laurie. So delighted to have you.
Thank you.
And joining Laurie as today's special guest is Paula Batson. In her decades in entertainment, Paula has always surfed on the leading edge of culture, whether on Willie Nelson's tour bus, to Duran Duran's landmark first commercial download, to helping Korean K-pop group 2 succeed on TikTok. She both recognizes and maximizes the current opportunities to connect artists with their audiences. As general manager of The Lights Global since 2016, Paula navigates strategy and oversees operations for the next generation entertainment company, record label, and management firm, leading projects for a roster comprising of multi-platinum superstar Lil Pump, emerging newcomer Kova, and hip-hop artists Swag and Lil Boss. By drawing on her diverse experience across music and technology, she has consistently galvanized the successes of TLG as a trend-setting force. She launched her career in the music industry with stints at labels such as Ode Records, RCA Records, and Columbia. Eventually, she led communications for Universal Music Group and all of its subsidiaries, notably emerging as one of the highest-ranking Asian American female executives in the entire industry. In the 1990s, she immersed herself in the fledgling music tech industry with senior roles at digital music pioneers N2K Incorporated, CD Now, and MyPlay. Upon Bertelsmann's acquisition of the latter, she worked both with then upstart Napster as well as old school direct-to-consumer music and book businesses. From there, she moved on to gain experience in the early social media monitoring company called Social Flow, BitBop, a mobile TV on-demand app owned by News Corp, and AI video creation app Magisto, and the groundbreaking live stream platform YouNow, where she met TLG founder Dooney Battle. As a self-professed lifelong learner, Paula is also a licensed Feldenkrais method practitioner. As well, she's a theatrical producer, producing By the Hand of the Father. Born in LA to a family whose grandfather played an important role in the Korean independence movement, Paula is especially proud of her Korean heritage. Please welcome these two amazing women to the smartest people in the room. Take it away, Laurie.
Well, again, thank you so much, Tom. And I've been fortunate enough, I have a number of my clients that have worked with Tom and have been on this program and are coming up to be on it. And he asked me if I'd like to interview anybody. And I sat back for a minute and I said, I'd really like to talk to Paula because she is the most forward-thinking, never say die, what's the next new thing person I know. And, a couple of us have always joked that we said, we want to be Paula. We all want to be Paula Batson when we grow up. But Paula doesn't ever seem to grow up. Paula keeps doing the newest things. And I think, as I transitioned from kind of the major label world to the digital world, I saw so many people get stuck in what was. And Paula, I mean, by the time I met you at N2K, I think you'd already completely changed your point of view. So, how did that happen? I mean, you went from being a major influencer, the head of communications at Universal, and then as we know, sometimes things change at the regimes of companies. What made you decide to just completely go off in brand new ways?
So I think Nashville plays a big part in this. Early in my career, I was really fortunate to have worked with some of the giants of country music, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson. When I worked at RCA the first time, the head of Nashville was Chet Atkins. And we actually got to talk on the phone and sometimes hang out. And my friend Shel Silverstein, Bobby Bear. So, I had this connection to Nashville. And when I left Universal, which happens, as you said, ownership of companies changes, regimes change. And I thought, well, what do I want to do? And I had a very dear friend, Liz Thiels, who people in this broadcast who are from Nashville may well remember. I know Debbie Newman knew Liz well. Liz had a PR firm in Nashville, and she was really one of the first PR firms to represent musicians, which seems so normal now, but she represented the Country Music Hall of Fame. She represented Winona. When I came to Nashville, I worked with Ken Levitan and his label. So I did come to Nashville to work with Liz. It was kind of a left turn sort of thing to move from Los Angeles to Nashville. But, I loved it. I loved working in the attic of a house on Music Row and learning about how people did things in Nashville, which was a little bit different than how they did things in Universal City. You had to be polite to people was one of the things. And you had to take your time and listen to them. So, there were certain, and you did your own yard work. there were certain things in Nashville that were considered the way you did things. And I loved being in Nashville in those, late 90s. Everything there hadn't been gentrified as much. My friend Mary Ann McCready was there. It was,
Debbie just brought her up.
yeah, Chet Flippo and Martha Hume, my very dear friends. Chet was living in Nashville, and so it was great, and it was a wonderful experience. But one day I got a call from Larry Rosen, who I'd known because he'd created GRP Records, and Larry and Elliot Goldman talked to me about a new company they were starting. And they said it was going to be digital music. And, I didn't really know that much about it, but I went to New York. I went to Larry's house. I had a talk with him. He told me I should get like a lot of computer magazines and read up on things and learn more about this. And I knew a little bit about it because being in Nashville, I had done one of the first AOL chats with Rick Trevino, an artist that I represented. And, maybe there were like 25 people on the chat, and Rick had to do this on his computer. And at first he was confused, but I saw that, this was something that had great possibilities. And so when offered the opportunity to go to New York and to be part of N2K, that's what I did. And it's funny because Dave Grusin was part of the company as well. Dave and Larry come from the old world of the music business, but they were so courageous and visionary about what was coming. So,
I mean, even GRP, if I remember correctly, their kind of claim to fame was they were the first CD-only record label, if I recall.
Yes.
And
the CD replacement cycle.
Yes.
Which was like the party that the record company execs thought was never going to end.
Yes.
And it gave them a false sense of security. But GRP was a big beneficiary of that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, and then for another blast for the past for a lot of folks on the call. So, at the time I was at Shorefire, I had met you technically through the phone. And I was up on the Velvet Rope, if those remember that chat group.
Yes.
And you had posted something for looking for, someone to run PR for the first, digital record label. And I mean, it's insane to think about now, but it was like, we're going to have websites for every artist, and and it was like, this was new. This was a completely new thing. And, I remember coming in and talking to you, and I ended up, instead of actually working on the label floor, working with you. And so it was like my space, your office, Dave Grusin's office when he was there, and Larry's office. So, I mean, I just had this amazing, I mean, technically it was a startup, but it was not run like a startup. And yes, I see Dave Leewood's post something about Dave Stewart, had a very memorable flight over to the UK, and for he was one of our artists. We did this crazy bus tour through London with a couple of journalists with him on a double-decker bus. I have some great pictures from that. It was good times, but there were already some of those tensions of I saw Duran Duran speak at South by Southwest, and there were we talked about the first digital download was with commercial digital download was done with them at N2K, and they were like, yeah, we just thought everybody was going to be like, this was the most obvious next step. But things that hit such a logjam at that time. And do you remember any of the kind of the feedback that happened? Because it wasn't all positive, actually, to the move to digital.
No, it definitely wasn't all positive. And I think we have to mention the great Phil Ramon here too, because Phil was somebody who he'd actually been a child violinist, a prodigy. And so I was so, amazed that he had come all that way to be, interested in what digital was going to do, and that he wanted to produce for N2K and have a label there. But, I do remember something that I don't know if you were there, Laurie, but we were in Larry Rosen's office, and he held up this blank disc CD, and he said, "Look at this," right? And he said, "My computer, I can put this blank CD in, and I can copy anything," right? And he said, "And pretty soon, all computers are going to have this capability, and it's going to be a problem." And so I do remember that well.
Yeah. And I also, I mean, speaking of Phil Ramon, and ironically, well, so this is an ironic story now, but I accompanied him to NARM, the big NARM convention in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And because he was doing the keynote, and he gave one of his great, I mean, Phil was just like possibly one of the like sweetest people you could ever imagine. And he gives this great speech, and I honestly forget which head of, I mean, it may have actually been someone from Tower Records that came up to him, and it was kind of like, "We love you, Phil, but we will bury you," kind of thing. It was like this kind of insane exchange where I'm like, oh my God. And, as you know, ironically, later on, I represented the NARM and the organization it became for a number of years through its transition about 10 plus years later to digital. So it was an inevitable change that was going to happen. But, I do remember there are people kind of digging their feet and getting through that, but then, I see Dick Wingate posting something about Liquid Audio. We were actually
Liquid Audio. We don't, Phil Weisner.
Then, you and I both took turns at A to B Music with Larry Miller and Howie Singer, and, doing kind of bouncing, but you like ended up, I mean, again, like bouncing in through you with A to B, you went to My Play, and there was one part, and then when My Play was acquired by Bertelsmann, that was the one where I really was worshiping at the Church of Paula, because we were just like I was I remember calling you and being like, "Oh my God, you've been acquired," like this whole thing, and you were just like, "Well, I'm just going to start to learn German."
I did study German for many years, and I still don't speak German. That's to tell you how difficult it is. Speaking about that time, so this is 2001 when My Play, the digital music locker, is acquired really at the time of the dot-com bust. So David Packman and Doug Campbell-John, as noted in the chat, David is now at Venrock and has been a very successful investor. But it was quite an amazing thing that the company was acquired. And, I think at the time, Bertelsmann, under the direction of Thomas Middelhoff, and with an executive named Andreas Schmidt, they were doing very bold acquisitions in the digital area. And one of the things they did was to make an investment in Napster. And they did not own Napster, even though they were sued by everybody as if they did own Napster, but they made an investment in Napster, and we worked together with Napster. It was this idea of companies like My Play, Napster, other companies they acquired. They really had an amazing array of forward digital companies. And I happen to know that Thomas Middelhoff went to the heads of every record label, including his own record label at Bertelsmann, and he offered them the chance to own Napster collectively. And he thought this was the greatest solution. Bring Napster into the major label system. And, one can only wonder what would have happened had any of them said yes. But actually, all of them said no, including the BMG label. And Middelhoff was frustrated, that what he thought was the future that he offered to everybody else. And maybe he was perceived as an outsider as well, but just the idea of owning Napster, they didn't want to own Napster. They wanted to destroy Napster and make it go away, which,
Yeah, I see David posting, it says about the antitrust concerns, and I think that,
right.
again,
Yes,
speaking
of course.
because I was at Sony, and the exchange I had about NARM, I mean, NARM actually sued Sony because of enhanced CDs, because the enhanced CDs sent you directly to a Sony website. So that was also why, and David points out the DOJ wouldn't have signed off on it. I mean, that was actually also why there were two, quote unquote, competing legit services, one which was Press Play, and the other at the time was MusicNet, now MediaNet. There was this, it was a very odd time, to try to convince. It was hard to convince the government when the CD and the music industry was at the highest point it had ever been, that that things were going to change, and they were going to change rapidly. And seeing David Hughes and I worked with a guy named Al Smith at Sony, who was very, very quirky. I don't know if you ever crossed paths with Al, Paula, but I just remember him saying, back like from when they first actually had the CD, and they said they knew this day was going to come, that people could rip CDs and change them on the internet, but they didn't expect it was going to happen that soon. That was the one thing. And then the other thing that I remember Al also kind of being like, he anyway, and I think a lot of people in the label system, which is where you have the problem, I think, between people who love music versus consumers who like music, is they really thought audio fidelity was like going to be an important make or break. And that realization, not like an MP3 file. I mean, I just remember this one, Al just being like, it's just good enough. Like, people were okay with audio that sounded bad and using that.
But Frank in the chat mentions about Steve Jobs and Apple. And in the end, the music industry handed over the keys to their vaults to Apple Music, because they perceived that format was somehow better quality. And was that the reason? I mean, or were they just charmed by all of the glamour of Apple,
I'll let somebody in the chat who probably knows better ask for it. But, I'll say the irony, and I know you and I talked about this, we had kind of the blessing and the curse of working with a lot of companies too early.
Yes,
quote unquote. And A to B, actually the AT&T A to B, the codec, that's the underlying technology of
right.
Apple.
Yes.
And they had pretty amazing marketing. I mean, I remember my own is technically Sony had an end-to-end system that was just as locked, quote unquote, as the Apple system. Sony was evil and Apple was amazing. So much was actually about the marketing and the positioning. And I think, honestly, I think Apple's market power as an outsider as well. Brian Zisk, hi Brian, points out he wasn't perceived as much of a threat. I don't know if Microsoft had tried to do it, it would have gone over as well. But I mean, like, I just, I just kind of want to get back to the, like, what made you go, like, I don't know, it's hard to talk about your own thought process, but when you joined Bertelsmann, what made you go, instead of like, okay, like, what was your thought process of how do I turn this into an opportunity? How do I turn this into a learning experience? The German part aside, which is amazing, but I remember you talking about going to like, the book fair, the Frankfurt book fairs, and like, what did you deliberately say to yourself, like, I'm going to expand my education on this, or is it just how you're wired?
Well, I have to admit that upon joining Bertelsmann, a number of us were there from my play. David Pakman, Chris Bell, who went on to build iTunes at Apple, some amazing people. And in the end, I was the only one who stayed at Bertelsmann from my play. And, it was disappointing because David Pakman and Stuart Goldfarb had a initiative where they actually had licenses from the majors that all the music that you had bought from the BMG or Columbia House music clubs could be put in a music locker for you in a digital format, which would have been amazing for the music clubs, right? So anything you bought in the past, it's going to appear in your digital music locker now. And it's hard to remember, but the music clubs, had millions of customers. They were very powerful. And, that deal, for a variety of reasons, didn't come to be. The initiative, wasn't able to be realized. And so that was quite disappointing, because that was sort of the hope of what could my play bring to Bertelsmann. But after that, and maybe this is typical of me, Laurie, I thought, well, what could I learn here? What could I learn about? And I actually started to learn a lot about direct marketing, which is not so glamorous or not so, hip and cool, but look at all the subscription services that are available now. I mean, this is, your beauty box. This is, all of the different kinds of subscription services for wine or things that people have now. And, the founder of the book clubs, came up with, some incredible marketing ideas, your book of the month or your CD of the month, that if you didn't refuse it, came anyway, right?
Right.
Was a quite innovative strategy. And I don't know if you know this, but the founder of Bertelsmann had been in a prisoner of war camp in Canada. And while he was there, he learned about the Book of the Month Club. And when he went back to Germany, the Bertelsmann, printing factories were, damaged. The business was in shambles. And he started a book selling business with a little book bus that went to the towns in Germany that didn't have bookstores anymore, that couldn't get books, and that's the beginning of the Bertelsmann media empire. So, the book clubs were fascinating. It was interesting to work with the music clubs. Eventually they were declining, but I loved going to the Frankfurt Book Fair, and we had book clubs all around the world. And I loved meeting all of our, we had a lot of international meetings, and, just becoming friends with people from the Czech Republic, from Turkey, from Germany. It was a great experience. So I guess this is part of, making lemonade out of what, was a job that didn't turn out to be what I thought it was going to be, but it was very rewarding, actually. And, I always like the idea of learning about something new. So.
Well, ironically, I say the direct to consumer model. I mean, that's really what we're dealing with now all
Exactly.
the time. So,
Exactly.
it seemed very unglamorous, 15 years ago, but now it's like, that's the thing. And actually the skill that ironically, if for those of us who were in the original label system, we didn't have, because there was always an intermediary between what we were doing. Our clients were really the record stores or other distributors, or in our case, journalists and media. Like, it wasn't actually talking, directly to people. So the nuance of that is important. And I know for myself, that's even, when I went to Harry Fox, which, with all respect to my HFA colleagues that I think are on this call, people are like, you're at Sony, that's not very glamorous. And it was this idea of doing, a turnaround at a company like that, and this completely different skill set of, I've never done direct working with, I learned all about the music publishing industry, which I had no idea was, so different than anything I'd done before. But also that that connection of making our newsletter that went out to all the people that were parts of HFA members, and getting people who come be like, thank you, that was the first time I ever understood this, or it was strangely satisfying to do and have that direct touch with people. And so I'd say at that about the same time, I mean, you and I were both kind of ended up, I said thanks to you. I actually is the moment I started Jaybird, another colleague from N2K, who I don't think is on here, Karen Allen, had reached and said, oh, there's this company, and I had started thinking about what was my next act going to be. And we said, well, maybe Paul and I can team up on this. And that was the end of 2000, the end of 2009, actually. That's where right. Things again were kind of in this sort of depressed moment in the larger sense, but it was this Hello Music ended up being, it was sort of the company that was considered the first revitalization of Web 2.0. And you ended up consulting with quite a number of companies at that point, and that's when you started getting more into working with social flow and social media. But why did you not, I remember asking you this at the time, why did you not stay a consultant? You always seemed to want to get back with a company. Why was that?
So I guess, part of it, and Laurie, maybe you feel this way too, but in some ways, doing PR or being considered a PR professional or a communications professional, for me, I mean, not the way you do it, Laurie, because I know you consult with the CEOs, you advise companies in all kinds of different areas, but there's something limited about how other people perceive what you're going to do for them. And if what they're hiring you for is getting X amount of coverage, that is not so interesting to me as being part of a startup, working with the CEO. I love the idea of helping entrepreneurs articulate who they are, what their vision is, what their value proposition is. And although that's highly overused, but the idea of being in the middle of a company where something exciting is happening. And, I have to say that I really see a thread for myself where, and I know it's been mentioned in the chat, the idea of artists being able to monetize what they do, being able to control distribution, being able to control their marketing and promotion, that dream. And maybe it's because I've always had a lot of artist friends, singer songwriters. You asked me, I have, friends in Nashville and Austin. I worked with Alejandro Escovedo, with the theater piece he did. And I remember, Wynton Marsalis coming into Bertelsmann one day to talk to us. And he said, I could call 100 of my friends and ask them to buy a CD. And I could do just about as well as the label is going to do when I first release a record. And so, this idea of the artist actually having the network, the power, to control their own careers. And, if there's monetization going on, why does there need to be an intermediary? And now, there's so many different ways that artists can monetize themselves, whether it might be Patreon or YouNow, where I worked, where YouNow just introduced a program where everybody who comes on and broadcasts, whether they're a partner or not, can earn money. If you look at what Snapchat did, giving away $1 million a day, it does require that the influencer post about 10 to 20 times a day. But, there are some Snapchat influencers who just earned $1 million,
Mm-hmm.
And then, at the Lights Global, we have an independent distribution arm powered by Video, which is an amazing company. Roy LaManna, has done so much to empower independent artists. And I literally can put out a record at my computer in 5 minutes, and it goes to all the DSPs and I can monetize at YouTube. So, and there are lots of, other services that also do this. So, the landscape for independent artists is very, very different now.
Yeah, and I see Michelle shocked on the chat, and I think we both. I certainly started my career working with a lot of independent artists, and them all kind of thinking like, well, the holy grail will be if I can get my a record in Tower, and getting to that, and now that technically that's all at your fingertips. The distribution is not the problem. They've learned that actually marketing is the problem. But I want to go around to like kind of what you said about being essentially being a PR person.
Yeah.
I think that's it is actually a challenge, because although I talk about my company and myself as that we're strategic communications, and I hear from my clients like, wow, like, oh, like this actually, you're trying to help me get to a goal. It's not just like all press is not good press if it doesn't actually take you in the direction that you're trying to go. And now we have all these other tools. So I'll say the brief moment of foresight I had in making my company is I decided to call it a communications company and not a PR company. Mm-hmm. Although PR is what I think people understand best. But at the same time, like when I got into it, and I was incredibly naive, I didn't realize there was a certain diminishment of it. There's a certain, that's where the female executives go. And to me, instead, it was kind of like, I was like, wow, I'm working with all these great, amazing women. And I think that was actually also N2K was a very different environment. Debbie's on, she had been a senior marketing person at Columbia, as had Sandra Tim DaCosta, yourself. I mean, I had these great examples around me. So I didn't really have that mindset of like, oh, being a female PR person was a bad thing. But in hearing you talk, it's like this position now at the Lights, where you're the general manager, like, you know, in some ways, as I said, you're kind of doing what you always did, but, you know, actually getting the title for it, I would say. I don't want to expand on that thought, but.
No, I do feel that way, that, you know, women weren't necessarily on a path to be general managers. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't something where we saw a lot of women in the very, you know, senior positions. And I was thinking about it. Maybe, you know, there weren't very many other Asian Americans in the music business when I started. But I think that's because many Asian families, they want their children to be doctors or lawyers. It's more typical. But in my family, my father had been part of the Federal Theater in the 20s, and he was an actor and director, and he always wanted me to go into the theater. And, you know, our family, you know, was a very progressive, left-leaning family, and we knew a lot of other people in the arts, and so it was much more natural for me to choose a career in the music business than it might have been for other Asian Americans. But now, you know, having seen the rise of K-pop, getting to work with a company in Korea that actually is the same company that put out the movie Parasite. I mean, it's incredible. And all of the, you know, Asian Americans now, you know, working in music, it's very inspiring. But I think I was just lucky that my family, you know, was very pro the arts. So.
And I'm glad you. I was thinking about this morning, and I said, I think, you know, in a similar way, you know, my family encouraged me. You know, my mother was always like, you know, you can be whatever you want to be, but they definitely, I don't think, expected me to turn out the way that I am necessarily. You know, that it's always been very difficult for them to kind of wrap their head around, you know, what it is that I do. And it actually sounds like you had less of a challenge in that in that regard. You know, than perhaps some of us did coming up. And so you know, working at the Lights, somebody was asking a question about Lil Pump. I remember teasing you about working with Lil Pump at some point, but can you talk a little bit more about like what, you know, I mean, now it's like, in some ways, you in a weird way, it is full circle. This is the modern entertainment company. This you know, 20, 25 years ago, you probably would have been working with Lil Pump, if Lil Pump, you know, but, you know, now it's a completely different environment. So
There's some things that happen when you work with Little Pump that are surprising.
Yes.
So I was thinking back to a video shoot that happened a while ago, when video shoots were still going on, and you know, I had to spend time in Little Pump's trailer, right? And you know, it kind of went on for hours because there's a lot of you know, hair and barbering and you know, glam that goes on, and so I was in that trailer for quite a bit of time, and I had to come out and talk to the director and our friend from Warner, who was there supervising things. And as I walked up to them, the director turned to me and said, "Oh my gosh, you smell like weed." Literally, I mean, later on when I went home, I realized, you know, my backpack, my clothes, everything just reeked of weed. And, you know, I don't smoke weed. I don't even drink alcohol. So, you know, it's kind of ironic that I'm walking around, you know, smelling like, you know, a spliff. So that's one thing. I mean, the other thing is the challenge of working with someone who's so young. You know, when we started working with Pump, I think he just turned 18. He'd made his success on SoundCloud on his own, you know, uh, making records in his bedroom or his friends' bedrooms, putting them up on SoundCloud. This whole idea of the SoundCloud rappers
Mhm.
who just didn't, you know any of the rules. That's still the case. He still doesn't know any of the rules. Um, and, you know, uh, but, you know, catching the moment, and, and this relates to something that I think, you know, because I work with so many young people, they understand so much about how uh, the the internet works, how streaming works. Uh, they understand intuitively about the algorithms and how you feed the algorithms, because you know it's not intuitive to artists that you would put out song after song. I mean, maybe one a week even on SoundCloud. Like, you know, our whole thing was you hold back the music, you release it according to a certain schedule, you know, you choose the best single, you know, all of these things that we thought were written in stone, you know, SoundCloud comes along and it turns out the algorithm loves that, you know.
Yeah, I
And
mean, and it's not just the, I mean, it's not just the algorithm, it's people, you
yeah,
know, I mean,
yes, yeah.
and I think that's, you know, the thing that's kind of interesting now. I mean, one of my clients, as you know, is the Association of Independent Music Publishers, the AIMP, and it's terrible because I'm blanking on the exact artist name, but we had a panel a couple of weeks ago that was about different people that have broken through, quote unquote, on TikTok. And we had a question about TikTok early on. And I remember the person going, well, I always do my TikTok videos using a butter knife because like they're really easy to find. I don't actually cook with a butter knife, but he does like, I guess, cookie, like he cooks on the video and sings.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And he knows that hashtag butter knife is going to like get him up to the top. And I was like, that just kind of like blew my mind that like, you know, to have that kind of presence of mind to do something kind of that weird in order to, you know, get to the top of a search. But again, it's an interesting tension that I sometimes hear from different members of the AIMP, which is like they don't quite know what to make. As you say, you know, these artists that don't follow all the rules, like, gee, do we sign them to a traditional publishing deal? Like, you know, how does that work? And so, you know, I mean, I know TikTok is central to
Yeah,
what
yeah.
some of this, well, not central, it's one of the many tools that you have at your hands. I mean, how are you and your artists viewing that right now?
So I think TikTok, you know, this is, you know, you talk about the algorithms and let's say the fans, right? And so the artists may have more power, but the fans have more power too.
Right.
And certainly at TikTok, um, the fans discover things that they then amplify, that maybe, you know, it's a song from 5 years ago. It's, you know, um, it's something that was old and forgotten, but they revive it and it has a whole new audience, you know, or, you know, they may choose a song that an artist put out that wasn't the primary track they were trying to promote, but TikTok loves it. Um, I think one of the things that I see happening is that uh, artists are putting out music earlier on TikTok. So it doesn't matter if it's unreleased. Um, you know, it's really good to put it on TikTok and you know, in a way, test whether there's traction to it. And the TikTok phenomenons, you know, sometimes it's related to the right action with the right music. So, you know, it's not the music alone, but it's, did this action, you know, whatever that is, taking hold with the TikTok audience? Is it something that they want to replicate in their own way, right?
Mhm.
And that could be a dance, it could be falling off a bed, it could be, you know, all kinds of things.
Right.
So I saw it. Was that a question, Laurie, about emerging artists? And
If there was it was very early question about, you know, kind of using TikTok, and then I think Brian Zist just asked a question that is kind of much more expansive, literally, of how you might think artists could take advantage of this expansionary economy besides selling their catalogs.
so I don't want to get too deep into this, but have people seen the article that was in the New York Times about NFTs?
There's definitely, I saw some divisiveness in the chat about NFTs earlier,
Okay.
but that sounds like one. Go ahead.
So I think the possibilities for blockchain and NFTs to give artists more ways to monetize their intellectual property. It's fascinating, you know, and I don't know that it's not really a get rich quick scheme, right? But and if that's what you think it is, and you're going to be buying up NFTs so that you can resell them immediately for huge amounts of money, I don't think that's a sustainable model. But is the idea that intellectual property can be on the blockchain, that every transaction that happens is on the ledger, and that you can create something that you are going to you know, make available for sale in this manner, that's very exciting. I mean, the other thing that and now, Laurie, this is like, you know, my friend Les Versailles is very into crypto.
Right.
And so I can't help but talk to Les. I'm like, what's happening? And I want to learn more about this. So I'm no expert, you know, but what's happening in DeFi crypto? I mean, literally.
You're like, see, like now I got to go look this up because you're like way over my head now. Like I know, you know, the blockchain thing.
Right. So people are using blockchain and crypto to create games in which people do what has been described as punk banking. So,
okay, so punk banking.
The idea of
I see where you're going next. I see what the next 10 years is going to bring us in Paula Batson land.
You know, DeFi crypto staking, people can read up on it.
Yeah.
But you know, you're taking your crypto assets and you're actually staking them and then making interest on them, you know. So
see, I did not expect that answer. You've already like blown my mind.
Yeah. So what can I say? But I think this thread of how do people monetize, you know, their work, and certainly in the world of music publishing, I mean, what's going on right now with the multiples that people are paying, it's quite extraordinary. But does that mean that music publishing overall will be worth more in the future? I mean, Laurie, what do you think? Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of, it's kind of the big question. And I think one of the interesting things, when you were talking about essentially covers before, you know, songs that are old, I think that's something that's still underexplored in the music industry, because we still have, you know, that thing of like the Hot 100 and things being new versus new to the person who's listening to it. And that's a very different skew, you know, and particularly when you get into older demographics. I mean, my 14-year-old daughter, she knows the stuff that's new, let me tell you. But, you know, folks that aren't spending as much time on the internet as she is, you know, something that's I'm still catching up on stuff from 5 and 10 years old. It's new to me. So I think that's an important thing to think about as well. And just to turn kind of your answer before, I mean, I see some questions about, you know, artists wanting to stay independent and, shouldn't artists be kind of, if I interpreted the question correctly, like be focusing more on writing songs. You know, it's been a long time since I've worked directly with talent, but I gotta tell you, I mean, I was lucky enough to work with artists like you, like with Wynton Marsalis and Everything But the Girl when they had their comeback, and Natalie Merchant, and, you know, anyone with sustained success works really, really hard. And I think that's the thing is people, like, even when, as you know, when people want to, you know, they tend to want to hire PR people too early in their career and where there's like nothing to get for them yet because they don't have enough traction in other areas. And there's no avoiding like being involved in your own career. This is your business ultimately. So, you know, Ben Watt would call me when he was finished with DJ sets at 4 o'clock in the morning his time. It was 10 o'clock New York time, I think. And you know, he wanted, at that time we didn't have email. He would edit press releases with me over the phone, and said, you know, do you want to do that? Are you that dedicated, you know, to all that you do in controlling your image? I mean, I think that's, I think it's an interesting question of, you know, people have this kind of myth in their head of how artists are not involved in the day-to-day of their career. I don't know if you have more to add on that, but I think that this to me is kind of a 'twas ever thus. You know, you have to work really, really hard. Musicians work harder, I think, than most people understand that they do.
I think, you know, some musicians resent the idea that they now have to work hard doing social media. And you know, there are kind of two ways to be present on TikTok. You can have your own TikTok channel that you build, and you build an audience for it. Or you can make music for TikTok that the TikTok audience, you know, wants to use. I mean, in a way, maybe that's music as a utility, but there are very successful TikTok producers who produce just for TikTok, you know, with music that maybe makes a good dance or makes a good action. So the idea of, you know, what do you want to commit your time to? Is it Instagram? Is it YouTube? And, you know, there is a line though, and there's something that happens where people move from being a musician to being an influencer, or they're an influencer and they can't move into being a musician. And a lot of influencers have tried. I mean, very big YouTubers have put out music and, you know, they haven't succeeded. So, you know, I always, you know, am careful with artists that they can see. You know, we have an artist named Kova who's very beautiful and talented, and we were looking at some pictures of Kova recently, and, you know, some of them, she almost looks too good. She almost looks like a model. And we would say, you know what, she's an artist, she's not a model, let's not use those photos. So I think artists need to have a sense of themselves. You know, Little Pump, his political choices aside, he from the very beginning saw himself and portrayed himself in a kind of cartoon-like way. And, you know, it's like he was a meme before he was famous. You know, he just had that sense of how to make himself a little bit bigger than life. I mean, somebody like Willie Nelson has become, you know, his own icon brand, braids, you know, all of this just because of his entire career and who he is. And sometimes that's how it happens. But sometimes people have an astute, I mean, look at Marshmello. You know, he has a box on his head, you know, but he made that choice. And you could say it's a brilliant marketing choice. So, you know, it's kind of disappointing that artists talk a lot about branding themselves. And I'm telling you, all the young artists, they're aware of this and they're thinking, oh, how do I brand myself? But I think organically, if artists can find, you know, who they are, who they want to be to their audience, and you know, some of that's done through what they care about. You know, if you look at Bruce Springsteen, I mean, he didn't set out to brand himself. He set out to do good, you know, around the things that he believes in. So
I think, you know, you had made this point when we were talking about like, it has always been in music about authenticity, and now perhaps even more so. And you could say that authenticity is different. So it's a Lil Pump, it's being like almost a cartoon, like that's authentic to Lil Pump, for example. You know, Bruce Springsteen in blue jeans is authentic to Bruce, and that's, you know, I didn't have good words for it at the time, but I remember telling bands, just like for photo shoot, you know, wear what makes you feel like yourself to the nth degree, you know, which was my way of saying. I mean, I think that's, in a weird way, despite the fact there's all these other things that people have to do now, it does actually allow you to be more authentic because there's no mediator. I mean, that's what I like about social media as a communications practitioner. I don't have to convince somebody else to write something in the way that is actually consistent with how I would like my talent to be portrayed.
So I'm going to weigh in on this because I saw the question. What did I think about what Morgan Wallen might have done? So we're talking about authenticity, and we're talking about, you know, how artists brand themselves. And so up till now, we didn't know how Morgan Wallen felt about racial inequality or any of these issues. And it's a hard leap to get to discussing those things from zero to wherever. As a crisis communications practitioner, sometimes I think they were late with the statements that they made. But you know, I think now it's about actions, you know, speaking more than words, and you know, maybe as an artist, this is going to have an effect on the songs he produces in the future, and he can go back to Jason Isbell and write some more with him, and they can donate it to the NAACP.
There you go.
The whole song this time. Anyway.
So Tom, I know we're past the hour here.
Sadly, we are, and I really regret that because I could listen to at least another hour of this. You guys have been mesmerizing. Paula, you are everything that Laurie said you'd be, and twice as much more. What a fascinating career you've had, all the bases you've touched. I didn't even, and I wanted to hear some stories about riding around on Willie Nelson's tour bus.
Yeah. Okay.
But seriously, we do need to wrap up. And I want to thank you both on behalf of the audience. The chat has been very active today. You guys have raised a lot of very interesting, both intellectual questions and sociological. And I appreciate you covering all those bases. Laurie, you're a terrific interviewer. So thank you for suggesting Paula as your guest. This has been terrific. Folks, a couple other things I want to share, and that is we do these every Tuesday and Thursday. This Thursday is no exception. This Thursday, we welcome Larry Mistel, the CEO of Primary Wave Music, and David Hazen returns in the interviewer seat, so please tune in. That one's an hour earlier than our normal time. And then also I announced something in the chat today that I'm very, very happy with, and that is the entire month of March, which is Women's History Month. We are featuring wall-to-wall women on this platform. And we're going to be doing more programs than just every Tuesday and Thursday. I've got about 16 programs teed up and featuring some of the biggest, most important names in the music industry and some names that perhaps you've never even heard of. And so please tune in. I guarantee you, you will leave smarter than you arrived. With that, I'd like to say stay safe and healthy and be nice to everybody. And we will see you soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.